Grandmother, the Arab trillionaire executive, hadn't walked for 17 years until the new black Maid did this. In the glittering skyline of Dubai, where power and wealth rise higher than the towers of glass and steel, there lived a man who seemed to have everything. Zayd al-Hakim was no ordinary executive. He was the heir to a trillion-dollar empire, a symbol of Arab power and prestige, the kind of man whose name alone could bend markets and silence boardrooms. Yet beneath the opulence of palaces, private jets, and fleets of luxury cars, one wound in his heart never healed. His grandmother, Amira, had not walked in 17 long years. Doctors, specialists, and healers from across the world had tried everything: surgeries, therapies, even the most advanced experimental treatments money could buy. But the once proud matriarch of the Al-Hakim dynasty remained confined to her chair, her spirit strong but her body refusing to obey. To Zayd, who owed his very discipline, vision, and courage to the woman who had raised him, it was a quiet agony. No matter his success, no matter the fortunes he amassed, he could not give her the one thing she yearned for most: the freedom to stand on her own 2 feet again. Then, on an ordinary morning, something extraordinary began. A new maid arrived at the Al-Hakim palace, a woman from the far reaches of Africa, carrying no wealth, no status, and no power but her hands and her unwavering faith. She was not a doctor, not a nurse, not a specialist. Yet within her eyes burned something different, something deeper, a conviction that life itself still held a miracle for the old matriarch. What she did in that house would not only shock the family, one of the richest men alive, but would challenge the very meaning of hope, resilience, and human connection. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. This is a story of how one African woman, armed with nothing but courage and compassion, stepped into the palace of a trillionaire and did what the world's finest experts could not. What she unlocked in the heart of the Al-Hakim family will leave you speechless. The Al-Hakim palace stood like a monument of power in the heart of Dubai's most prestigious district, its golden gates towering above the desert sands, and its marble halls echoing with silence that money could not buy away. For all the riches stored inside, for all the laughter of grandchildren and the sound of business empires being built through late-night calls, one silence was heavier than all the rest: the absence of Amira al-Hakim's footsteps. Once, her presence had filled every corridor, her strong voice guiding her family, her walk steady and proud. But for 17 years now, her chair had become her prison, and the palace, no matter how grand, felt like a mausoleum of her former life. Zayd al-Hakim walked those halls every morning with the precision of a man who carried a trillion-dollar empire on his shoulders. He wore tailored suits that whispered wealth, his watch glinting under the Arabian sun, his every movement reflecting discipline inherited from years of relentless ambition. But his eyes betrayed him. Whenever he visited the East Wing where his grandmother lived, the steel in his gaze melted into sorrow. For though he was known as the most ruthless executive in the Arab world, to Amira he was still the boy she had raised when his own parents were too busy building empires. She had been his anchor, teaching him how to respect tradition while embracing modernity, how to wield power without losing compassion. Yet now, when he saw her in that armchair by the arched window, covered in silk shawls, her hair silver like desert moonlight, Zayd felt powerless. All his deals, his mergers, his palaces scattered across continents meant nothing, because the woman who had made him who could not stand, could not walk, could not dance again as she once had during family celebrations when the oud strings played deep into the night. He had flown in specialists from Germany, Japan, America, even Russia, neurologists, surgeons, miracle workers, each one greeted with hope only to leave with bowed heads, their science defeated by the frailty of time. 17 years had passed, each one deepening the quiet grief. The world knew Zayd al-Hakim as untouchable, yet behind those walls, he was a grandson who tucked his grandmother's blanket at night and prayed silently, even when faith seemed futile. The morning that would change everything began like all others. The call to prayer echoed softly in the distance, carried by the breeze through the open courtyards, blending with the scent of jasmine from the palace gardens. Zayd had just returned from an early board meeting when his chief housekeeper, Fatima, approached him. Her voice trembled slightly, not out of fear but out of caution. for she knew her employer tolerated no carelessness. "Master Zaid," she said, bowing her head respectfully. "The new maid has arrived. Shall I bring her to the East Wing?" Zaid barely glanced up from the documents in his hand. Normally, the arrival of a new servant was of no importance to him. Hundreds had passed through the palace over the years, their names quickly forgotten. Yet something in Fatima's tone made him raise his eyes. "What's her name?" he asked. "Naomi," Fatima replied. "She comes from the heart of Africa. She has little experience, but she insisted she could be of help to your grandmother." That last sentence made Zaid pause. He lowered the papers, his sharp eyes studying Fatima. "Help my grandmother? Did she say that?" "She did, sir, and not in the usual way. She said she was sent here for a reason." Zaid frowned, both intrigued and wary. Many people had claimed to bring miracles to the Al-Hakim Palace. All had failed. He gave a slight nod. "Very well. Take her to the East Wing. I will meet her there." The East Wing was always quieter than the rest of the palace, its walls adorned with paintings of desert caravans and ancestors who had built the Al-Hakim fortune from pearls and trade long before oil reshaped the land. Amira sat by her window as usual, her eyes on the horizon, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She heard the footsteps before she saw the figures, and her lips curved into the faintest smile when her grandson entered. "Zaid," she said softly, her voice fragile but dignified. "You are back early." "For you, I am never too busy," he replied, kneeling beside her chair and pressing her hand to his forehead in a gesture of reverence. Behind him, Fatima entered with Naomi. She was younger than Zaid expected, perhaps in her late 20s, with skin the color of polished ebony and eyes that held both humility and strength. She wore a plain uniform, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity, as if no palace, however grand, could intimidate her spirit. Amira's eyes shifted to the new maid, studying her carefully. Naomi lowered her head in respect. "It is an honor to serve you, madam," she said, her voice carrying the melody of her homeland, steady and warm. Something flickered in Amira's gaze. She had seen countless faces come and go, but there was something different about this one, a stillness, a conviction. "Naomi," Amira said, her voice firmer now, "tell me, why have you come here?" The maid lifted her eyes, and in that moment, even Zaid felt an unusual weight in her presence. "Because I believe your journey is not finished," Naomi answered. "Because I believe you will stand again." The words hung in the air like a spark in dry desert grass. Zaid's jaw tightened. He wanted to dismiss it as foolish optimism, the same false hope he had heard from countless charlatans. And yet, there was something unshakable in Naomi's tone, something that silenced the cynical voice inside him. Amira's lips trembled. For 17 years, no one had dared speak to her so directly, so boldly. She searched Naomi's eyes for any trace of mockery or deceit, but found none. "You speak with confidence," Amira whispered. "But do you know how many have tried and failed?" Naomi stepped closer, her hands folded respectfully. "It does not matter how many failed. What matters is that you have not stopped longing to rise. And longing, madam, is the first step toward miracles." Zaid felt his chest tighten. For years, he had shielded his grandmother from disappointment, protecting her from cruel promises. He wanted to stop this conversation, to protect her once again. But something in his grandmother's face held him back, a spark of life, fragile but undeniable. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant call of doves in the courtyard. Then Amira leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. "Very well," she said softly. "Then show me, Naomi. Show me what you believe I can still do." Zaid's heart pounded in his chest. He had seen world-renowned surgeons fail, had watched his grandmother suffer the humiliation of countless therapies. And now, this young maid stood in his palace, daring to awaken hope where even science had surrendered. For the first time in years, Zaid felt something he had not allowed himself to feel. Fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of believing. Because if Naomi's promise broke his grandmother's heart again, it would destroy him too. And yet, as he looked into Maid's unwavering eyes, a question he could not silence whispered in his mind. What if she was right? The following morning, the palace stirred under the rising sun, light spilling across domes and courtyards like molten gold. Inside, tension spread faster than the aroma of cardamom coffee. Everyone had heard whispers. The new maid believed she could help Madame Amira stand again. Some dismissed it as superstition, others as arrogance. But even those who scoffed carried curiosity in their eyes. Naomi walked softly through the east wing, carrying no instruments, only a folded mat and a basin of warm water. Her face betrayed no fear. To the other staff, she seemed too calm, too sure. To Zaid, who stood in his grandmother's suite adjusting his cuffs as though the ritual could hide his nerves, she seemed like a contradiction he couldn't yet place. Amira sat in her chair near the window, wrapped in a pale shawl. She had been awake since dawn, unable to quiet the pulse of anticipation. When she saw Naomi enter, her lips curved faintly. "You came early." "In healing," Naomi said gently. "The day must begin with hope before doubt grows loud." The family physician, Dr. Rafiq, arrived moments later, carrying his tablet. His expression was professional, but his tone guarded. "Madam, your condition has resisted every therapy. We must avoid false hope." He turned to Naomi, skeptical. "What training do you have that countless specialists lack?" Naomi didn't flinch. "I was trained by the bodies of people who refuse to give up. I only offer patience and hands that listen." Zaid felt the exchange cut the air sharp, but his grandmother lifted her hand to silence further debate. "We begin," she commanded, her tone reminding everyone she was still the matriarch. Naomi knelt by the chair and placed Amira's feet gently on the mat. She pressed warm cloths against the ankles and calves, then began to rub in small circles, coaxing warmth into forgotten muscles. "Tell me," she whispered, "about the last time you stood without fear." Amira closed her eyes. "At my son's wedding. Music filled the night. My body was light. Hold that memory." Naomi said, "Let it return to your bones." Minutes passed, Naomi's touch steady, her voice a quiet thread weaving through the silence. Zaid shifted restlessly by the window, watching his grandmother's face soften with each stroke. He wanted to believe, but belief was dangerous. "Try to move your toes," Naomi murmured. Amira concentrated. At first, nothing. Then, like a ripple across still water, a toe quivered. Barely a tremor, but real. Zaid's breath caught. He had sat through meetings where nations signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking, but this tiny movement nearly undid him. Naomi didn't celebrate. "Again," she said calmly. This time the tremor came stronger. Amira gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "I felt it." Dr. Rafiq leaned forward, studying the screen. "Muscle activation," he muttered. "Unexpected." Naomi continued, guiding gently, pressing along the knees, adjusting the position of the feet. Her humming filled the room, a low melody no one recognized, yet it calmed even Zaid's racing thoughts. Slowly, she encouraged Amira to press her feet into the ground, not to rise, only to remind the brain of the forgotten path between will and body. After half an hour, Naomi wrapped Amira's legs in flannel and leaned back, her own forehead damp with sweat. "Enough for today," she said. "The body must finish before it is exhausted." Amira's eyes glistened. "It felt like remembering," she whispered. Zaid crouched at her side, struggling for words. For 17 years, he had seen failure after failure. But this was no illusion. Something had happened. Naomi stood, gathering the basin. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we will try with breath, just the smallest lift, supported, only if her body allows." The room fell silent. Amira's lips trembled into the first true smile her grandson had seen in years. But not everyone shared it. That evening, word spread to the palace until it reached Layla, Zaid's elder sister. She arrived unannounced, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble. She stormed into Amira's suite, fury flashing in her eyes. "This is reckless," she snapped, glaring at Zaid. "You swore never to let another fraud near her. How dare you let this continue?" "She is no fraud," Zaid said quietly. Layla turned on Naomi. "And you, who are you?" Where are your credentials, your degrees? You think with your hands you can succeed where science failed. Amira's voice, though soft, carried command. Enough, Layla. If hope has returned to me, it is mine to risk. And if this woman listens to me better than the world's experts, then she stays. Layla faltered, torn between pride and obedience. She looked at her brother, seeking support, but Zayd's expression was unyielding. One session. Layla said finally, her voice like ice, "Tomorrow, and I will be here to witness it." Zayd nodded. His eyes lingered on Naomi, searching for cracks, for arrogance, for the pretense that had always destroyed his grandmother's fragile hope. But all he found was calm determination. Later that night, while the palace lights glimmered against the Dubai skyline, Naomi sat on her narrow bed in the servants' quarters, sewing a soft cloth belt with careful stitches. She worked in silence, her mind steady. Tomorrow, she knew, the true test would come, not just for Amira's body, but for the faith of everyone in that golden house. And as she finished the final stitch, the question that haunted Zayd returned, echoing in the silence. What if she was right? The palace had seen board meetings worth billions, weddings that drew royalty and feasts with a scent of saffron and oud clung to every surface. But never had its halls felt the quiet tension that settled on the east wing the next morning. Even the staff moved differently, steps softer, glances sharper, as though the entire household had been pulled into the gravity of what was about to unfold. Amira sat in her chair, dressed in an ivory abaya embroidered with gold thread. Her hair was combed neatly back, and her eyes carried something the family hadn't seen in years: anticipation. She looked less like a patient and more like a queen awaiting coronation. Naomi entered with measured steps, carrying nothing but the cloth belt she had sewn the night before. She bowed her head respectfully to Amira before greeting Zayd and Layla, both already present. Layla stood with her arms crossed, her white suit pressed to perfection, her jaw clenched tight. Zayd remained near the window, back straight, his phone silenced, a small sign of how much this moment eclipsed every empire he controlled. Dr. Rafiq set up his monitors with clinical efficiency. "Vitals before we begin," he said, wrapping the cuff around Amira's arm. "Blood pressure, steady. Heart rate, calm but elevated. Oxygen, perfect. We proceed cautiously," he warned. Naomi nodded. "We move only as the body allows." Amira reached for Naomi's hand. Her voice was soft but clear. "Let's begin." Naomi placed the belt gently around Amira's waist, tightening it just enough to secure. Then she guided her feet flat onto the mat, positioning knees over ankles. "First, we breathe," Naomi whispered. "Breathe tall. Feel the spine stretch. The body must remember balance before movement." She placed one hand on Amira's shoulder and the other just above her abdomen. "Inhale," she said, inhaling with her. "Exhale." The room followed unconsciously. Even Layla's rigid posture softened with each synchronized breath. "Now," Naomi continued, "we asked the legs to listen." She adjusted Amira's knees. "Press your feet gently into the ground. Not to rise, only to remind them what they are for." Amira pressed. For a moment, nothing. Then Naomi's sharp eyes caught the smallest tightening in the thighs. She smiled faintly. "Good. They are listening." Zayd clenched his fist behind his back, his body wound like a bowstring. He wanted to look away, to guard himself from disappointment. But he could not. "On my count," Naomi said, "we will rise, only the smallest distance. I hold you. The rails hold you. Your grandson is here. Your doctor is here. You're not alone." Amira nodded. Her lips trembled. "One," Naomi whispered. Zayd's heartbeat hammered against his ribs. "Two." Naomi braced her arms, legs planted firm. "Three." Amira pressed her feet into the mat, her arms trembling as she gripped the rails. For a heartbeat, her body resisted, heavy as stone. Then, with a shudder that rippled through every muscle, her hips lifted from the chair. Half an inch, no more, but enough to make the room gasp. The belt went taut. Naomi's face glistened with sweat, but she steadied Amira, whispering encouragement. "Breathe, hold. You are standing in memory." Layla took a step forward, hand hovering as if to stop the impossible. "She'll fall," she hissed. "She will not," Naomi said firmly, never taking her eyes from Amira. "One more breath. Now down." They lowered slowly, Amira landing back into the chair with a soft exhale. For a moment, silence. Then Amira's face broke into tears, not of pain but of disbelief. "I felt the earth," she whispered. "I felt it again." Zaid turned away, pretending to adjust his cufflinks, but his throat ached with emotion. For 17 years he had buried this dream, and now a stranger's hand had cracked it open. Again, Amira pleaded. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "One more, gently." The second attempt was stronger. This time Amira lifted a full inch from the chair. Her knees shook, her breath caught, but she held for 2 full beats before Naomi guided her down. The room erupted, not in cheers, but in stunned silence that carried more weight than applause. Even Layla's hand, which had hovered with suspicion, lowered slowly to her side. Dr. Rafiq stared at his monitor, eyes narrowing in astonishment. 17 years, he muttered. "And she activates now?" He shook his head, unable to explain. Naomi removed the belt carefully, crouched in front of Amira, and took her trembling hands. "Enough for today. We end with success." "No," Amira whispered fiercely. "I want more." "Tomorrow," Naomi said gently, "if you climb too fast, the body rebels. Tomorrow, we will rise again." Amira leaned back, exhausted but radiant, her smile luminous through her tears. That night, the palace hummed with whispers. Staff carried the story like fire through corridors and kitchens. Madame Amira had stood. The impossible had begun, but not everyone was ready to celebrate. In the family dining hall, Layla confronted Zaid as they ate in silence. "This changes nothing," she said coldly. 2 inches of lift does not erase 17 years. If word gets out and she fails again, the family will be humiliated. The press will devour us. Zaid's fork clinked against his plate. "Do you care more for headlines than our grandmother's joy?" "I care for the empire," Layla snapped, "and for protecting her from false hope. How many times must she be broken?" Zaid's gaze hardened. She was never broken. She was waiting. The siblings locked eyes across the polished table, both carrying the pride of Al-Hakim blood. Neither yielded. Meanwhile, Naomi sat alone in the servants' quarters, hands resting on her knees. She replayed every detail of the session, every tremor, every breath. The work had begun, but was fragile. Hope was as delicate as glass, and one slip could shatter everything. She whispered a prayer to herself, not for miracles, but for strength. Strength to guide Amira one step further tomorrow. Yet outside the palace walls, another storm was forming. A journalist had caught wind of rumors. The Al-Hakim dynasty had hired a maid to heal their matriarch. Online whispers grew into questions, and questions into speculation. Was the richest Arab family in the world chasing superstition? Naomi didn't know this yet. All she knew was a promise she had seen in Amira's trembling legs, the fire that had returned to the woman's eyes. And as the moon rose above the desert, Zaid stood on his balcony overlooking the glittering city. For the first time in years, he let himself whisper into the night, "What if tomorrow she truly stands?" The next morning, the palace carried an energy that felt unlike any in years. For 17 years, the East Wing had been heavy with routine. Nurses coming and going, doctors arriving with scans, therapists leaving with polite apologies. But now, every servant, every guard, every relative moved as if the air itself had changed. The whispers of what Naomi had achieved were impossible to silence. Madame Amira had risen, if only for moments, from her chair. Naomi prepared the room carefully. She rolled away the delicate rugs and replaced them with rubber matting. She checked the wooden rails along the sides of the chair, pressing her hands against them to test their steadiness. She tied and retied the belt she had sewn, making sure the fabric wouldn't slip. It was still early, the sun just climbing above the horizon, yet her palms were warm with anticipation. Amira was already waiting. Her eyes glowed with a hunger no one had seen in her for nearly 2 decades. Her shawl slipped from her shoulders, And for once, she did not ask to have it replaced. She wanted nothing between herself and this moment. Zaid stood tall near the window, his suit immaculate, his watch gleaming. Yet beneath the polished armor, his heart was unsettled. He had not slept much. Images of his grandmother's trembling body haunted him. Her effort, her courage, the near fall that could crush her fragile hope. He wanted to trust Naomi, but trust was dangerous when tied to love. Layla entered next, her heels clicking against a marble. She carried the air of someone ready for battle. Behind her came her husband, Tark, his expression uneasy. He was a banker, a man who lived by numbers and stability, and he despised risk. He kissed Amira's hand, but whispered to Layla, not quietly enough, "This cannot last." Amira heard him. Her sharp eyes softened into steel. "Do not tell me what can last," she said. "I decide what endures in my life." Naomi crouched in front of her. "Today we rise a little higher," she said gently. "Supported, only if your body agrees." Amira nodded. "I am ready." The physician, Dr. Rafiq, set the monitors again. He shook his head as though to clear disbelief from yesterday, but his hands moved carefully, as though he, too, was hoping. "Feet flat," Naomi instructed, adjusting Amira's position. "Back tall, hands on the rails." We breathed together. The room fell silent, except for the rhythm of their breath. Naomi's voice was low, steady. 1, 2, 3. Amira pressed down to her feet, her arms quivering as she pulled on the rails. Naomi braced the belt, guiding her upward. Slowly, inch by inch, Amira's hips rose from the chair. This time she lifted 2 inches, maybe more, her body trembling but her spine stretching tall. Gasps filled the room. Layla's hand flew to her mouth. Zaid's jaw clenched as if holding back a cry. "You are standing," Naomi whispered fiercely. "Breathe. Hold." Amira's eyes filled with tears. I feel the earth again." The words pierced Zaid's chest. He wanted to run to her, to hold her, but Naomi's command kept him still. "Do not touch unless I tell you." 10 seconds passed. Then Naomi guided Amira gently back into the chair. The old woman sagged, exhausted but radiant. Laughter burst from her lips, broken by tears. 17 years, and today I stand. The room erupted. Even the skeptical Tariq bowed his head in awe. Layla, however, stormed from a room, unable to bear it. Later that day, in the grand dining hall, the siblings clashed. Layla's voice carried to the cavernous space, echoing off gilded walls. "Do you not see the danger? Every journalist in the city is already sniffing around. They say our family has turned to superstition, to witchcraft. Do you know what that does to our reputation?" Zaid stood at the far end of the table, fists pressed against polished wood. "Our reputation does not matter compared to her joy." "Our empire matters," Layla snapped. "Investors will panic if they believe we are ruled by hope instead of reason. She is our grandmother." Zaid thundered. His voice cracked through the silence like lightning. "The woman who built us when we were children. If she wants to fight, we let her fight." Tariq interjected softly, trying to calm the storm. "Hope is dangerous currency, Zaid. If she falls and breaks herself, the world will not forgive you." Zaid turned on him, his voice sharp. "The world has never forgiven us for being who we are, but I will not let fear decide her fate." Amira's voice, though weak, carried from the doorway. She had come, supported by Naomi. "Children," she said, silencing them, "do not argue over me. I am still alive. I still choose." The room froze. Her frail body looked impossibly small against the towering doorframe, but her words filled every corner. "You think you protect me with fear," she said, her eyes on Layla, "but you only chain me further. I would rather die trying to stand than live another day imprisoned by your caution." Naomi guided her back to the chair, but the damage and the healing were already done. The family could no longer pretend this was just therapy. This was war, hope against pride, faith against fear. That night, Zaid stood on his balcony overlooking Dubai's lights. The city stretched endless, glowing with the wealth he controlled. Yet none of it compared to the sight of his grandmother's trembling body rising inches from her chair. For years he had fought for dominance in boardrooms, but this was the only victory that mattered. Inside her quarters, Naomi prayed quietly, her fingers brushing the belt. She knew tomorrow would demand more. With each step forward came greater risk. Muscles long dormant could snap, bones could crumble, hearts could break. Yet she also knew that courage was never born from safety. And so the palace braced itself for the next dawn, carried within its walls the fragile seed of miracle and the looming storm of family divided. For outside the gates, the world was beginning to talk. Rumors spilled into news feeds, blogs, whisper headlines. Was the richest Arab family in the world gambling its legacy on a maid's touch? The question rippled across the desert night, unanswered, and in the silence of his chamber, Zayd whispered to himself, "Let them talk. If she walks, the world will kneel." The palace had never felt so alive. From the lowest servants to the highest relatives, every corridor buzzed with anticipation, as though the marble itself knew that history was about to bend. For days, Naomi had been guiding Amira through small lifts, tiny victories that to outsiders seemed insignificant, but to the family meant the impossible. Each time the old woman's body rose from her chair, even if only an inch or two, the weight of 17 years seemed to lift with her. Yet the world outside the gates had grown louder. Reporters waited like vultures. Blogs spread rumors of superstition, and whispers claimed the richest family in the Middle East was gambling their dignity on a maid's touch. That morning, Zayd walked into his grandmother's room earlier than usual. He had not slept. His suit was crisp, but his eyes betrayed a sleepless night of worry and resolve. Amira was already awake, her shawl falling loosely from her shoulders, her eyes brighter than they had been in decades. Naomi stood at her side, belt in hand, steady as always. Layla lingered in the corner, her expression torn between fear and awe, pride and skepticism. "Today," Amira said, her voice fragile yet firm, "we do not lift halfway. Today we stand." Zayd's chest tightened. He had fought presidents, tycoons, and kings, but never had he felt so powerless. "Grandmother," he said softly, "are you certain?" She met his gaze with unyielding fire. "I have lived 17 years sitting. I will not die without standing." Naomi fastened the belt around her waist, her hands moving with reverence. "We will do this carefully," she said, slowly, with everyone here. The room fell silent as Amira placed her hands on the rails. Naomi crouched low, her eyes locked on Amira's trembling legs. Zayd and Layla flanked either side, ready to catch her as she faltered. The physician checked her vitals once more and gave a reluctant nod. "On my count," Naomi whispered. 1, 2, 3. Amira pressed to her feet, her face tightening with effort. The rails creaked, the belt strained, but Naomi's steady hands held her firm. Inch by inch, she rose. First 2 inches, then 4. Her knees wobbled, her body trembled, but she did not stop. Gasps filled the room as she rose fully upright, her spine tall, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm standing," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm standing." Zayd could not hold himself back. He stepped forward, his arm around her back, his own tears breaking free. "You did it," he murmured. "You're standing." For the first time in 17 years, Amira placed her hand on his shoulder, not from a chair, but from her own 2 feet. She laughed through sobs, a sound so pure it silenced even Layla's doubts. "I told you," she said, "I would feel the earth again." Naomi guided her gently back into the chair, the triumph echoing long after she sat. Amira's chest heaved, exhausted, but her eyes glowed with victory. "This is not the end," she said. "This is the beginning." Word of the moment spread faster than fire. Within hours, footage leaked, grainy from a servant-hidden phone, yet powerful enough to shatter the internet. Headlines screamed, "Matriarch of Trillionaire family walks after 17 years." News anchors debated whether it was science, faith, or miracle. Crowds gathered at the palace gates, chanting her name. Inside, Layla confronted her brother again. "Do you see what you've done? The world is watching. If she fails tomorrow..." She didn't fail today, Zayd cut her off. His voice was no longer doubtful, but resolute. And that is enough. For once, Layla had no reply. She sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. That evening, the family gathered for dinner, Amira seated at the head of the long table. She looked smaller than the chandeliers above her, but her spirit filled the hall. "I know you worry," she said, her eyes sweeping across children and grandchildren. "But life is not meant to be lived in fear. I will walk again, not because I am rich, not because of doctors, but because hope is stronger than despair." Naomi sat quietly in the shadows, listening. She had not come for glory, nor for riches. She had come for this moment, an old woman reclaiming her dignity. She had seen it before in villages far away, in mothers who walked again after childbirth injuries, in elders who defied paralysis with stubborn will. But never had she seen it in a palace of gold. Later that night, Zayd found her in the courtyard. The desert wind blew gently, carrying the scent of jasmine. "You have given her more than medicine ever could," he said. His voice was heavy, but grateful. Naomi shook her head. "I only reminded her of what she still carried inside. It was always her strength, not mine." He studied her, the maid who had done what the world's finest specialist could not. For once, the man who ruled empires felt humbled. "Stay," he said quietly. "Not as a servant, but as part of this family. Whatever you ask, it is yours." Naomi smiled softly. "I ask only to keep walking beside her. The rest is not for me." The moon rose high above them, casting silver light across the palace. Somewhere inside, Amira slept with a smile, dreaming not of loss but tomorrow's steps. And as the world debated miracles, superstition, or science, Zayd whispered truth only his heart knew. That courage, compassion, and faith were the only empires that never fell. If this story touched your heart, remember, courage can change even the most impossible destinies. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in miracles, because sometimes hope is the greatest wealth of all.